a company called Play.com appeared.
Play.com's fantastic savings on Christmas gifts.
A mail order company. Very bright orange logo, Play.com.
Avoid the crowds and make this Christmas time to Play.com.
Everyone I knew in the industry was like a bit puzzled by who these people were, because they were in Jersey and they were incredibly cheap. And what mystified me was they were selling my records. So they were selling Porcupine Tree albums at prices that were really cheap.
This is Season 2 of the Corruption Diaries from the Tax Justice Network. I'm Naomi Fowler. Over the past 6 episodes, you've heard how Richard Allen carved out a place for himself in the British music industry, how he discovered the band Porcupine Tree and set up a record label, Delirium. By 2003, he was in his early 40s and he had a clear sense of what was next for his business and his young family. He'd weathered the highs and lows of the music biz for a decade. He'd decided to stop touring and managing the band and focus on his trusty mail order business, the Freak Emporium, at a time when online retail was supercharging physical music sales.
Sales of physical music were shifting from shops to mail order. Mail order was starting to take off because of the internet and was just growing exponentially. That's what internet retail is. Everyone gives it this magical name, online retail. It's just mail order.
These were the early days of online retail, which led to the domination of a company like Amazon, who've now pretty much captured most markets using a dazzling array of techniques. Play.com started to cause big problems for Richard's business.
And I'm thinking, where are they getting this stuff and how are they able to sell it cheap? I just couldn't work it out. And people would speak to me on the phone and say, who are these people and why have they got my stuff, other labels? And then a guy in the office said, can I order some stuff and have it sent here? He works in the mail order department. And I said, yeah, no problem. So then about a week later, about 30 packages come popping through the door, all with this Play.com bright orange logo on it. And I said, why have they sent them all individually? Why aren't they in one box? That's bizarre. And he said, oh, there's no VAT.
That is value-added tax, VAT. It's like a sales tax, a tax the government adds to most products and services. In 2003, that was 17.5%.
And he goes, stuff the government. It's brilliant. And I remember saying to him, well, if that's the case, that's not good because we have to pay VAT. And if they're not paying VAT, they're going to put us out of business. I went to a trade fair in London at Earl's Court. It wasn't just about e-commerce, it was about jiffy bags and everything. It was the mail order industry trade fair. Went along and I came across a section called offshore fulfillment. I thought, what the hell's that? So I went in, walked up to this guy. So I said, so what's offshore fulfillment then? He said, have you heard of a company called Play.com? And I went, yeah. And he goes, well, if you send your stuff to Jersey, we can send it from there to people in the UK and you don't have to pay any VAT. So suddenly the penny dropped. I went, that's what they're doing.
The Jersey he's talking about is one of the Channel Islands, a tiny, self-governing possession of the British Crown. It's a tax haven just off the coast of France.
Having realised that, I then found a company in Jersey, and this company offered me the service. The guy came over to see me and said, look, here's what you do. We take your stock and you give us your orders and we'll send it out to your customers. Naively, I said to him, okay, well, let's try it then. I gave him some CDs. I sent him all the orders. He sent it all out. We didn't bill VAT. It worked.
By testing this loophole, Richard saw he could eliminate the cost of the 17.5% VAT, or VAT, sales tax that the UK charged on CDs sold within the EU or that were imported. This could allow him to reduce his price to his customers or offer them free postage.
What I wanted to see was, would it arrive within a day? Because obviously, mail order, you don't want to wait weeks for it to turn up. And it was very quick. What he didn't explain to me was the risk involved. In order to be able to do any of this, you had to pretend you were in Jersey. It's not mail ordered from a company in Jersey. It's mail ordered from a fake company in Jersey that's pretending to be you. Fake directors and companies that I could control over the phone that I had no link to directly. And then he started hassling me, saying, well, what are you going to do, put your whole business through Jersey? And I thought about it, and I thought, no, I'm not, because this looks dodgy as hell. I can't believe that this is going to be allowed to continue. And I always remember he said, you're going to regret it. He said, soon everyone will be doing this and you'll be out of business. We did quite well in 2004, and then we started getting customers going, no, you're too expensive, I'm buying from Play.com. Play.com started off selling pretty mainstream rubbish. It was all sort of, pop music from the charts. We weren't really threatened by it because the stuff they were selling was just the same stuff you could buy in a supermarket. But then we noticed they started to sell the specialist catalogue that we were selling, deep back catalogue titles. And Play.com started listing these things. They were listing them at prices that we couldn't touch. When I saw them doing that, I was thinking, right, now this is a problem. I went on the internet and I started looking for people that were raising the issue of this thing. The only two people I could find was Richard Murphy.
He's a British economist.
And the Forum of Private Business, the FPB. And I rang them and they said, oh yes, we're campaigning on this issue. And one of our members knows quite a bit about it. And they put me on to John Biggs. And John was a goldmine. John Biggs was a businessman who ran a business services company. And at one point he had tried to sell ink cartridges in the UK and was the agent for Lexmark. And when he tried to do this in the late 90s, he suddenly discovered he was up against people selling stuff from Guernsey and Jersey and undercutting him. And he was very early on affected by it.
Guernsey is another small island tax haven close to Jersey. They're both Channel Islands, both so-called Crown dependencies, which means they're possessions of the British Crown. If you're from the Channel Islands, you're British, but the islands, weirdly, aren't.
No, they're not part of the United Kingdom. They are geographically and politically separate.
This is John Christensen, former senior economic advisor in Jersey and co-founder of the Tax Justice Network.
Historically, the Channel Islands, they're not totally independent, but by and large they're allowed to get on with their internal affairs.
This weird situation has led to, on the one hand, aggressive tax havenry policies and levels of financial secrecy that have helped suck away tax revenue and attracted dirty money for decades now. And on the other hand, plausible deniability on the part of the British government and its own closely linked financial centre in London. Back to John Biggs. That's the guy running the business services company and selling ink cartridges. This is the guy Richard got in touch with when he realised the seriousness of this tax dodge going through Jersey and Guernsey. One morning in 1998, John Biggs was at Southampton Airport.
And he's watching all these flowers being flown out to Guernsey on these trolleys. And he asked the guy, what's all these for? And he said, oh, they're all going out to Guernsey, but they'll be coming back again tomorrow. So he then twigged, like me, that there was a scam going on. But he'd done it in 1998, and he'd already had engagement with HMRC on this issue.
HMRC is the British Tax Authority.
And he had got involved in 1996 when the Channel Islands first started taking advantage of this VAT exemption.
This VAT exemption, VAT, had a name, LVCR, or Low Value Consignment Relief. It meant that VAT, sales tax on packages of low value would be waived. It was a 1980s directive from the European Economic Community, which later became the European Union, and it applied to products coming in from outside the European Economic Community, which the UK was a part of at the time.
The idea was that collecting VAT on a postal package that only had a value of £10, it was just administratively complicated to do.
That's £10 sterling. Let's say very roughly $10.
So the idea was that you didn't have to pay VAT on low-value packages to avoid the administrative grief of having to deal with it.
This seemed sensible, but to understand why it became such a threat to the business Richard had built, we need to take a quick look at the relationship between Europe, the UK and the Channel Islands. John Christensen again.
When Britain joined what was then the European Economic Community in the early 1970s, a carve-out was agreed, which meant that the Channel Islands were left outside the political entity known as the European Economic Community at that time. Later on, it became the European Union. So they were outside for political reasons, but inside for trade reasons. And that was an extraordinary concession, because it meant that the Channel Islands could continue with a free trade arrangement with the United Kingdom, which they historically had. And that free trade arrangement was extended to the European Economic Community without Jersey or Guernsey or any of the other Channel Islands actually becoming full-blown members of the European Economic Community.
That was quite a concession the UK government wangled out of those early trade negotiations with the rest of the Europeans. Then two things happened to add into the mix. A combination of trading rules between Europe and the UK and between the UK and the Channel Islands meant that Play.com and others willing to use the loophole that opened up got a competitive advantage. It caused big losses in tax revenue, and it doomed Richard's VAT-paying UK-based CD business to inevitable failure. It got more tricksy. At the time, CDs costing £10 to £12 qualified for the low-value consignment relief tax exemption LVCR, provided they were shipped individually. To exploit this, retailers like Play.com would ship, let's say, a 6 CD order in 6 separate packages. So, by avoiding the VAT or VAT charged on the UK mainland, these offshore sellers gained a massive price advantage. At one point it was as high as 20%. That meant they could undercut competitors like Richard and dominate the market.
And so it was a perfect storm. It was like having part of the UK that was outside the EU. People just sent goods out of the UK in order to deliberately send them back in.
Back to John Biggs again. That's the business services guy who was one of the first to see the danger of this loophole.
John had complained. He basically understood European law. He was able to have these arguments with HMRC on a very technical level. And he had written to them, and there's a whole exchange of letters to and froing with HMRC, and officials had come to meet him.
There were reviews, but nothing came of it.
He made me realise that in order to have this battle, I needed to basically understand the law. So I then spent the next few years teaching myself European law. I read every case I could find related to VAT exemptions and taught myself how the directives were put together, what their origins were, and essentially wanted to arm myself to the teeth.
You've been listening to The Corruption Diaries, Season 2, Episode 7, with me, Naomi Fowler, produced by me and by Leo Schick. Sound design also by Leo Schick. In the next episode...
That was the moment where I thought, wow, this is a war, you know. It was a war.
Delirium Records music used in this episode was courtesy of Cherry Red. If you liked a song, see the track listing in the episode notes.